I know what this sounds like coming from a channel that's filled with tutorials for about 90%, but tutorials really aren't that good of a thing for your learning experience. It's not that tutorials are bad in and of themselves, it's just that a lot of you are using them in kind of the wrong way. In the end, your goal should be to learn to create without tutorials. Not just relying on somebody having made the exact thing you want and copying that. Because as soon as you try to get a little bit creative, you're going to run into huge issues. That being, you're trying to make something that doesn't yet exist, and as such, there's not gonna be a good tutorial for that anywhere online. So now what? You're stuck. So instead, let's take a quick look at how you should be dealing with tutorials. Instead of looking at a whole problem, let's take a game development example here, like how to make a first-person shooter RPG, like Borderlands. Now, you may be able to find a tutorial that shows you exactly what you want, but most likely you won't really find what you're looking for. Instead, what you should learn to do is break up your problem into smaller parts. Those smaller parts become less and less specific, and suddenly you're able to find things on Google and YouTube a lot easier. For our example, we can already split this problem into two huge parts. The first is being a first-person shooter, that's one thing, and then having RPG mechanics is a whole separate problem from that. Then the art style is also a whole separate problem in and of itself. So now we have three things to look for instead of just one. But even now, some of those things are rather specific, and as a tutorial maker, it probably isn't even worth making videos about something like that. So let's try to break down these problems even more, starting with the RPG mechanics. Because they're pretty simple. We need a system that can collect and store experience, a system that can use that experience then in turn to level up your characters, and a system to gain rewards like stat upgrades or things like that from those levels. Potentially also a system that lets you create abilities that you can also hook up back into that leveling system. Now we have broken down RPG mechanics to its most basic building blocks. And the wonderful thing about that is, now that we've done that, we can add or subtract any other features that we want if we break them down in the same way as well. Whatever parts you might want to add or subtract from your game, you can do that now. We'll do the same thing with the shooter parts, breaking it down into things like the basic movements, the basic weapon functionality like aiming and shooting. Once that's in place, we can start on a system that can let you carry multiple weapons at a time and switch between them whenever the player wants. Maybe we need an inventory, which we can then break down into needing to be able to keep track of items, a way to store those items, a way to display those items, and so on and so forth. And as you can see, what started as I want to make a Borderlands clone but I can't find a tutorial has now grown into a whole network of smaller different problems that you can find easy solutions to. Sounds like a lot of work? Well, yeah, creating things, especially video games, is a lot of work, but now that you've broken these things all down to their basics, you can properly understand each individual aspect and reuse that knowledge in the future rather than going out and hoping that the exact thing you're looking for already exists with a guide out there in the wild. And just to complete the whole thing, the art style as well, we can break down into a couple of smaller bits. You'll need to learn how to make a cell shader, create outlines for your 3D models, and learn a bunch of texturing techniques that, to be honest, I am in no way qualified to talk about, because that's not really my speciality. This isn't at all to say that tutorials that display full features aren't a good thing and don't have a place. Sometimes, if you can find one, it can be nice to just be able to follow along a coherent path from start to end and look at somebody making a whole gameplay feature in its entirety. And it can also really help you to understand and see the separate building blocks coming together to make up that feature. So, by all means, keep watching tutorials, preferably mine, I do like the views. But try to be aware of what and how you're learning. When you're watching a full tutorial, try to see if you can separate it into smaller individual parts anyway. It will help you a lot for your own understanding and learning process. This video was a little bit shorter than I usually do, I know, but that is because I reduced it to the most basic building blocks, so that only the important information is here, and I'm not wasting your time with a bunch of filler content. You see, this way of thinking works not just for game development, but any creative problem-solving work needs this. Anyway, if you do want to watch some tutorials or see me making progress in making my own game, there's a subscribe button down below this video, and if you hit that, you can keep up to date with all of that, as well as more of these types of videos coming in the future. And a very big thank you to all of my Patreons. You can see them on screen right now. If you want to help out supporting the channel, there's a link down below in the description to the Patreon page. And a special thank you to Eleanor for supporting at the Cave Digger tier on Patreon.